So let's take a look at number 18. Number 18 says 32x to the fifth power times the quantity. We call this a quantity because of the parentheses. Anytime you got an expression written inside parentheses or braces or brackets, we call it a quantity. So the quantity of negative y to the third power over 2x, all raised to the ninth power. Now, in my first step, I'm not going to do nothing with the 32x to the fifth, but I am going to apply, using the power of a power rule, I'm going to apply this exponent 9 to everything inside the parentheses. So what that means is every exponent inside the parentheses gets multiplied by the exponent outside the parentheses. That's one of the exponent properties that you got to know. So I did 9 times 3. That gives me the 27. That's why I got negative y to the 27th power. Now, technically, this negative sign is really a -1 coefficient. So I also technically did -1 to the ninth power, which still gives me -1. Because when you have a negative number raised to an odd numbered exponent, nothing changes. You still end up with a negative. Well, some things could change if it's not a 1, but you're still going to end up with a negative because of the odd numbered nature of the exponent. Now, but what about the 2x? So I got to do, this is a mistake that a lot of people make because they don't realize that 2 has an exponent also. This coefficient 2 is really 2 to the first power, even though that 1 is not written. So you got to do 2 to the ninth power, right, which is 512. And then you also do x to the ninth power, which is x to the ninth. And then what I can do is I can combine these two, because this is a fraction being multiplied by a term that's not a fraction. You can combine all of this into just one fraction. Now, why is this 32 negative? It's negative because I multiplied 32x to the fifth times negative y to the 27th. Remember, that negative sign is really a -1. So it's like me doing -1 times 32. That's why the 32 became negative. Whenever you're doing a math problem, always make sure you understand where every symbol, every term, every number, all that, where everything came from. So I got -32x to the fifth, y to the 27th, right? Then in the denominator, I got 512x to the ninth. Now this 512 turned into a 16, and this -32 turned into a 1. Now why did that happen? That happened because 32 is actually a factor of 512. So the common factor between 32 and 512 is 32. So that means 32 divided by 32 is 1. 512 divided by 32 is 16. So that reduces this fraction. Now, what do I do with this y to the 27th? I can't do nothing with it. It's just left in the numerator. Oh, but look, I realized a mistake I made. This was negative. So where my negative sign at? I should have a negative sign, right, next to the y to the 27th. So let me write that. Right? I was slipping. So this should still be negative, right? Wait, I can't see. Okay, yeah, this should still be negative, -y to the 27th. But what about the x's? Where'd the x's go? So another property of exponents, the division property of exponents, x to the fifth divided by x to the ninth, that would be x to the -4th because you subtract the exponents. Subtract the exponents. 5 minus 9 is -4. Now, so how is it a positive x to the fourth? How is it x to the +4 down here? Because the negative exponent rule says that you switch around. If you have x to the -4th in the numerator, you can move that to the denominator and it becomes x to the +4. So that's why our final answer is -y to the 27th over 16x to the 4th. But just go back, rewind the video, run it back, and make sure you understand every step and all the different properties that I used. The power of a power property, where I apply this exponent 9 to every exponent inside the parentheses. Right, this 9 don't got nothing to do with this 32x to the fifth, though. Keep that in mind. Also, the division rule for exponents, x to the fifth divided by x to the ninth. Also, what was another rule I used? Oh, the negative exponent rule. How did this x to the fourth get down into the denominator when at first it was in the numerator? Right, and also this part right here, -32 over 512, that's just arithmetic. That's just how to reduce fractions. We got to know how to reduce fractions. We got to know how to find a common factor and divide each number, the numerator and denominator, by that common factor. All right, so we end up with negative 1 over 16, right? So that's where the negative sign comes from, and that's where the 16 comes from.